Listen up, get ready, I'm not gonna take no more. There's a revolution, a revelation going on in my soul. Buckle up, get ready, we're not gonna sit back.
Citizens of the world, welcome back to Live from the Heartland for the week of July 25th. And I'm still Michael James up here in Chicago's 49th Ward. And my next guest is someone who I met at the Heartland Cafe many years ago when he was delivering his newspaper called Lumpen. And I remember liking the name because I had read a little bit of Marx and knew about the lumpen proletariat. So we're really glad today to have Ed Marszewski, who is if you look him up on Wikipedia, they say is a publisher, artist, entrepreneur from Bridgeport, Chicago. He has been nicknamed the unofficial mayor of Bridgeport. Quite a title. So good day to you, Ed.
Hey, man. I didn't know that was on my Wikipedia entry. How hilarious.
I don't even have a Wikipedia entry. I got to get on that, or hopefully someone does. We'll see. But congratulations. You got a lot of information. They have it by category. They have politics. They have radio. They have restaurants. You've got a lot going on down there, and I'm been kind of checking it out. And we are honored to be one of the shows that is included in the repertoire on Lumpen Radio, WLPN FM 105.5. And I want to thank you for that. So tell us a little bit about yourself, where you come from, what happened to you growing up, what inspired you that leads you to this place today where you have a lot of fingers in a lot of fires.
Oh, boy. Well, it's a tough question in a way because as you think about what happens to you over time, you often go, how the hell did this happen? Why am I here? What is going on? So, but I think in general, I grew up in Evergreen Park in Beverly when I was a kid here in Chicago, and moved to Downers Grove. I went to college at the University of Illinois. And I think that's where I drank the Kool-Aid, because it was there, outside of my kind of like cloistered suburban high school experience, that I ran into a bunch of amazing new ideas. I started off in art school. I dropped out of art school and started majoring in political science and history. And through the professors that I met there, I was introduced to a bunch of new ideas about how to view the world. And it was there, I remember going to a bunch of different cafes, student groups organized this seminary co-op over in Urbana, is where I was introduced to the left press. And when I started reading publications like In These Times, Mother Jones, the Utne Reader, The Nation, I realized that what I was studying in school was a kind of like Victor's history of the world, right? And I started delving into alternative views of what was happening in our politics and our history in general. A few of my professors were great. I remember taking a class called The Politics of Mass Death. And it was an incredible experience because it almost seemed to be like a way to test the kids in class to see whether or not they'd be great to work in the civil service or if they should join one of the agencies. And of course, at school, there's a lot of that activity going on. And when the Gulf War hit, my friends and I just got heavily involved in the anti-war activities there. And we started a little zine called the Lumpen Times, because we believe that if people merely had the right information or all the views of a particular subject, that they would make the right decisions on what we should do as a nation, right?
We wish.
Yeah. So I had that naive belief back then, which completely changed my entire existence, because it led me into being in love with alternative journalism and being part of like this information battle, this information war against the corporations, corporate news, corporate hegemony over our lives. So instead of going to law school, I decided to move back to Chicago, and I started looking for jobs in the alternative press, and I was able to land an unpaid internship In These Times, where Jimmy Weinstein took me in. I was not a credentialed Ivy Leaguer, just a little schmuck from a public school at the University of Illinois. I wound up working with Beth Schulman, who was basically the director of fundraising and operations there. And while there, I wrote some pithy reviews and realized that the left, I thought, was making these publications was pretty boring. Since I had done Lumpen Times in college, I put up flyers all over the Columbia and Art Institute campuses saying, hey, who wants to start an alternative newspaper in Chicago? Meet me at this diner at 8 p.m. on Tuesday, whatever. I rented out an office at the In These Times complex. We had like a little office cube where we started a thing called The Paper. Basically, it was a bunch of people getting together who cared about what was happening on the planet. We started a free circulation paper, walked around the neighborhood of Wicker Park, Logan Square, and asked people to advertise in it. Over time, I stopped doing the paper. Some of my friends from Champaign were moving back to Chicago as well. And I quit doing the paper and relaunched the Lumpen Times out of a dump on Armitage and Rockwell over by Bucktown. And it was from there we decided to make a monthly publication. We worked with some of our friends from In These Times and all the people we met in the neighborhood. And that process of just wandering around the neighborhood, telling people we're starting a paper, led to us being introduced to different writers, different artists, different musicians. Kind of like, what the Heartland Cafe did was like a third place for people to gather who were interested in art, activism, politics, music, etc. That whole neighborhood of Wicker Park was a beautiful place back then. It was a incredible concentration of artists and progressive-minded people who were concerned about their role in gentrification in the neighborhood, concerned about local politics, upset about the hegemony of the Daley administration back in the time. And then, we would meet at Myopic Books and Earwax Cafe back then. So these third spaces became our kind of unofficial office spaces as well. Quimby's bookstore also started, and it was a place where you would get a massive range of zines and publications from around the world. And it was at that kind of exciting time of people using the printing press and creating zines that we got involved in so many different aspects of Chicago's culture. Left organizing groups, different activist groups, artist organizations. So that kind of fertile ground led to us to be able to integrate ourselves at an intersection of art, music, literary life, etc. And we were often an advocacy journal for people getting involved in changing the world. And that happened through the 90s. We were able to survive because we were all living in cheap rent places. We didn't have to use all of our time to make money. We used most of our time to make this publication and distribute it. It was a great time to experiment with the format of the publication and to learn how to disagree with each other about what we would print. And it was really exciting for us. It kind of reinforced that it was important for us to play a role in amplifying ideas that were not getting out there in the mainstream or corporate press.
And so is the Lumpen newspaper still come out? I see it every once in a while. Usually it's out of date, but is it still something you put out?
Yeah, we used to put it out like 10 or 11 times a year, like the journal, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then it went down. When the turn of the century came is when the kind of .com boom came. And I got involved with a bunch of people. We pivoted towards making a Lumpen magazine on acid. And we made this thing called Supersphere. And Supersphere actually was a place where we combined the alternative press along with shooting video and audio we would record live concerts all over Chicago and then eventually in a couple of cities in Europe. And we would put those videos up online so people could watch these concerts. We were using the Real Player, and this is before YouTube existed. So we started, artists and activists started using these new tools of the internet, right, as a way to compete with corporate media. And back then your website, the things you were doing could be a lot more interesting than what CNN or Chicago Tribune or the Sun-Times were doing. And we were the leading force at developing new uses of this technology. So our website, Supersphere, reviewed music. You could watch the concerts. We started putting up underground films. And we then had a team of videographers and editors who traveled around the world covering the anti-globalization movement. So we would go to different sites of protests, whether it was in Seattle during the World Trade Organization protests or in the various lettered protests throughout the country and throughout Europe. It was exciting to see how we could, as artists, activists, media makers, provide alternative views of what was happening in the world. And then, of course, we also created guides to our different cities. We created the forums for people to talk about what was up. But what was really weird is that this scrappy little group of people were able to get about 1 million people a month to look at our website. Wow. Around in the year 2000. And of course, at that time, we were involved locally with the anti-real world protests. It's kind of charming to think that back then, people could actually understand that the real world and the recording and surveillance of our lives was a bad thing, and actually gathered outside the building in which the TV show was filmed to protest it in a sustained manner over months, over an entire summer. To think about that is just baffling to me, because it seems like it's so hard to get people to be involved in kind of abstract battles against capitalism or surveillance. But that's the kind of world we lived in. People were very hopeful. There was a dream that we could stop the corporatists. We could stop neoliberalism. We could stop, the transformation of the Democratic Party into the second corporate party in America. And then, the dot-com boom fell apart. We lost our funding. 9/11 happened and created a massive disarray with the left in general. A new era of surveillance and repression and state kind of like dominance over our lives formed in our heads, and then became a kind of like series of policies that would restrict how the left was able to progress prior to the turn of the century. So I started doing Lumpen magazine again then, and it was through those adventures with Supersphere. I traveled the world, understood the intersection of art, education, technology, and started these festivals called Version Festival and Select Media Festival. And those festivals were insane, kind of like conferences and convergences of artists and activists, musicians, and weirdos from around the world to come to Chicago to talk about how we could resist, or how do we create parallel worlds. And we did those for about 14, 15 years, actually. It was pretty crazy. And in one of those Version festivals, we launched it in Chicago in the neighborhood of Wicker Park at a space back then that was called Buddy. It was a loft live workspace. And that live workspace from 2002 to 2005 really changed my life radically. It was this kind of living with others collectively in proximity, having all these creative people in one area in your daily life, coming into contact with people, generated so many ideas, generated so much activity, which included those aforementioned festivals. We started new publications. We started putting out free DVDs and free audio CDs of music of people in town, and of the videos being made that were made in like a kind of like underground film circuit. And at that time, that space had about 100 events a year, and it drove our landlord, Mr. Lubinsky, crazy. The building was a complex with Heaven Gallery and a bunch of other weird spaces upstairs. But yeah, that period where the second Gulf War happened was another moment of massive activity. You would see hipsters turn into activists. You see apolitical people going out in the streets. You have a creative culture creating the messaging and going out and doing creative ways of just cultural interference. And it was incredible to see the kind of flourishing of activity. There was a weird gathering called the Transatlantic Business Council, in Chicago, an obscure, weird conference. And it brought out thousands of people in the street. People came out in the street in such numbers. We saw the evolution of kind of like control and repression and surveillance at that time. But it was beautiful to see people come out for these abstract kind of conferences for globalization and capitalism. So it was also a hopeful time just a few years after 9/11. And then we started doing these festivals, and we got kicked out of Wicker Park we helped destroy it, gentrify it. The rents went up. We could have probably stayed somewhere else or did something else, but 3 years of having an event every other day in a shared live workspace led to it being a completely trashed out dump. And it was difficult to keep the place because the landlord basically didn't enjoy the fact that we trashed it. So we started looking for spaces and wound up here in Bridgeport. Now in Bridgeport, my mother owned this little liquor store / bar, a tiny place in the middle of the west side of Bridgeport on Morgan and 31st Street. I was always there to help be, free family labor. Although, just like you pay your son, my mother paid me as well. So Maria's became this kind of like unofficial office for a lot of us. That's where we would hang out when I was working, and we would hatch new plans. The bar became like a really important gathering place for us. And because I was in that bar, I met a guy who wanted to sell me an abandoned building down the block. And we got this abandoned building here down the block on Morgan Street and moved into it and made our new space. And the different thing about this space is that it had apartments on one floor, and then the main storefront was just for art activities. And we were able to separate our personal mess, our personal lives from the common space. And that was a great move forward for us in terms of continuing to provide a space for various communities to use. So moving to co-prosperity, which is what we started calling it, allowed us to have a home base of operations. We wouldn't be evicted because I owned the building. We created an office for Lumpen and all the various other publications we started. And then we just started doing exhibitions, and we started holding festivals based in Bridgeport and using Bridgeport as a base. And then we would work with the City of Chicago's Cultural Center. We would work with the Museum of Contemporary Art. We would have these version gatherings. So like I said earlier, of like up to 5 to 1,000 people each festival. The festival would last anywhere from 2 weeks to a month long. And we would do that based out of our spots here. When the financial crisis came in 2007-8, the housing crisis, it obviously affected everyone again, affected people like us who were involved in the creative industries. People were losing their homes. So we decided to start another magazine called Proximity Magazine. And it was meant to be an art magazine that would document and amplify what was happening in Chicago and how it connected around the world. The social engagement art practice that was developed in Chicago spread throughout the world, and it was led through some of the contributors and writers describing that activity in our publication Proximity. And that publication allowed us to kind of talk about how artists can survive in a time of crisis. We lost the New Art Examiner, the only art publication that was coming out of Chicago at the time. So a lot of what we started doing was like, why doesn't the city of Chicago have this? Or, we don't have an awesome art magazine. Maybe we should start one. So through that time over the last decade, like from the mid 90s onward to this period in the early 2000s, a lot of what we're doing is like, how do we build institutions, platforms, et cetera, to support our art ecology here in Chicago? And how does it intersect with activism? How does it intersect with social justice? How does it interact with promoting human rights? And that's essentially the crux of what everything is that we do today. We did those festivals. We started doing more publications. We started doing more events. We started doing more shows. We applied for a license from the FCC. It was the only time the FCC was allowing new licenses to open up on the air. We applied, and then because we were a nonprofit, we were able to apply. We actually were able to get the license, and we were quite surprised. It took a year or two to even know if we could get the spot on the dial. And we weren't prepared at all. We were just like, we'll just apply. Like, you apply for grants all the time. You're never going to get anything. Nothing's going to happen. No one's going to support you, but you apply anyways. And then we were just surprised that we got it. And they asked us, well, do you really want to do a 24-hour radio station? And we said, yes. And then like a month later, they sent us a letter and email saying, okay, you have 105.5 FM. You have 1 year to get this up. And it drove us to figure out how we're going to do that. Through those years of working on the festivals, through all the things that we've been doing, I've met so many amazing people who are awesome producers, go-getters, incredible people who could get anything done. And one of them was Logan Bay. And Logan was living in Thailand at the time. And I begged him to move back to Chicago to help form a Lumpen Radio, which he did. So Logan and I and a few of our staff here started the station. And we started recruiting all kinds of people to get on board. We were able to launch a web-based station within 3 or 4 months. We had a massive fundraiser at that time, 2011 or 13 maybe? I don't even know anymore. 2010? Gosh, where are we? 2015? Anyways, I started a brewery. I took over my mother's bar, Maria's, with my brother. We started a Maria's Packaged Goods, a community bar. We expanded the bar to have another audition with a Korean Polish street food place called Kimski.
Is that because you're both Korean and Polish?
Of course.
Well, I wanted to hear about that. We're running out of time, unfortunately.
Oh, my God. Okay, great. Well, I'm so sorry. There's too much to say.
That's good, but we'll have you back. And I really... I've been on your radio show when I went there with the Klonsky Brothers show.
Oh, yeah.
And I know that you're at Co-Prosperity. You're taking, I think, applications for exhibits. So you have something going on. Can you do that briefly? Tell us what that is.
Always, the gallery is always accepting proposals for exhibition. You go to the website. You could go to publicmediainstitute.com to look at all the stuff we do. Or you could go to coprosperity.org. Anyways, there's always a way to get involved with the platforms. We're all, we all do too much. If we don't get back to you right away, just hit us back again. You kind of have to repeat contact with us because we're inundated with people wanting shows.
I'll bet. Well, I'll be in touch with you about being back on this show. Maybe putting some photos down there. I want to thank you for coming on, Ed.
Yeah. Thanks for having me. Sorry, I just kept blabbering.
That's okay. People want to know about you, and that's good. I want to